Hello, everybody. My name is Janet Naklia. I'm a programs manager with Alberta Recreation and Parks Association, also known as ARPA. If you're wondering where you are, you're in the right place. You are at the webinar entitled A Personal Look at Indigenous Traditional Food Systems. But before we go any further with any introductions or anything like that, we have learned from our elders that we like to start things in a good way. And so we will start with a smudge, and then we will continue on with our conversation today. So I would like to offer this tobacco to you, Kacey, so that you can open us with a smudge in a good way so that we could create this ethically safe space for us to share this conversation. So I'm offering this virtually to you and pass it over to you for the smudge.
Perfect. Thank you, Janet. I just, while my camera was off and was muted, I did a little smudge before we started, but I'll do a little prayer, just open up the meeting, and I'll do that with my mic off and my video off. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much for that, Kacey. Really appreciate the smudge and the prayer that you did for us today. And as we know, it's like you mentioned, it's so that we could start this in a good way. So thank you for that. So speaking of starting things in a good way, like I said, my name is Janet. That's the name my mother gave me. I also hold a Cree name, Muskiki Kihiwasquale, that was given to me by Linda and Daryl Brass of the Medewan Lodge here in Calgary. I also hold a Blackfoot name, which is Amska Pitaki, which means South Eagle Woman. And that was given to me by Elder John Chief Moon, who is from the Blackfoot Nation. And so with that, I am situated here in Wilkinsis, which is the Blackfoot name for Calgary. So I did want to acknowledge that land. The conversation we're having today is very much about and tied to the importance of the land and the systems within it and how we as individuals are tied to that system. So I wanted to acknowledge that. I also wanted to acknowledge our brothers and sisters who in the north, Casey's in Samson, also in Edmonton in Treaty 6 territory. So I would like to acknowledge that as well, as we are here virtually and it's a whole new world. So I wanted to start with that. So if you didn't know, we are here today as a precursor to June, and June is important because it is June is Recreation and Parks Month. We like to celebrate that in the recreation and park sector, but it's also National Indigenous History Month. So all of June is opportunity to celebrate stories from Indigenous communities, and as you should know, June 21st is National Indigenous Peoples Day. So all of those things are coming together in an important way to bring us here today and to share this story. Another quick thing that's happening is Communities Choose Well, which is a program of Alberta Recreation and Parks Association, that's us, has created a module on traditional Indigenous food systems. It's actually sponsoring our conversation today. So I'm going to turn it over to Alicia, who's a program officer with Choose Well, to explain that module, and then to introduce our speakers, of which I should first say we have Kacey Yellowbird here, who is a very active Choose Well champion, award-winning Choose Well champion, may I say. And we have two guest speakers I'm really excited about, Hannah Cunningham and Robbie Potts, who are researchers from the University of Alberta. So we have a great rounded conversation happening with us today. So Alicia, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll move on to Kacey, Hannah, and Robbie.
All right, great. Thank you, Janet, for introducing and for the land acknowledgement, and thank you, Kacey, for the smudge and the prayer to start us off with. So as Janet mentioned, we do have a brand new learning opportunity through ARPA. We collaborated with elders and Indigenous community partners across the province to create an online educational module honoring Indigenous traditional food systems. This module is free. You can access it in the link that I'm going to drop in the chat right away here. So great learning opportunity. We're going to be focusing on traditional Indigenous food systems throughout June is Recreation and Parks Month, as well as National Indigenous History Month. And so we're going to start things off with Kacey. I'm going to actually show the video that we had produced of him winning his award. Kacey is featured in the module for the traditional food systems for his work on a community hunting and freezer program. So I will queue up that video and we'll get started with that.
We started this program about 7 years ago, but it did start with a vision. When I was 16 years old, I lost my grandfather, who taught me how to hunt. And before he passed away, he told us, he said, you know what, Kacey, you got to do two things. Because times are going to get tough. Times are going to get really tough. You got to learn how to hunt and share with the people, and you got to learn how to garden. And those are the two programs that we've been doing through our health promotion pillar here at Samson Youth and Sport Development.
I see Kacey as a born leader. The stories that he tells me, the things that he says, and when he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. And to be honest, there's not that many people out in our own community to do something like that.
The impacts that I see from this are kind of like a tree that has, a branching out. It starts with, this idea, this one champion in Kacey that's doing this, and he's going to teach others, to create these bigger branches, which they therefore will create others to create more, and this great big tree is eventually filled with all these different things, but all these different people have gained new skills, new abilities, and things that will make them proud and build them confidence in the things that they do, for the future.
It's a vision, and I believe you can't stop a vision from happening when it's passed down to you, which my grandfather passed us down, and now I'm trying to share this vision with others, and they're starting to see the vision, they're starting to see, what's happening and why we're doing what we're doing, and why it's important what we're doing. And now that we've got our youth involved, the vision will carry on. It'll carry on for generations to come.
All right, and with that, I'll pass it over to Kacey, Hannah, and Robbie.
Forgot to unmute myself here. But anyways, thank you, Alicia, for that sharing that video, and for the kind words. And again, thank you, Janet, for asking me to do the opening prayer. Because I really believe, when we open any meeting, I guess any gathering, it's important to open with the right state of mind. And with that, I'll go directly into the presentation of what we do here. And as you've seen in the video, we run a program through Samson Youth and Sport Development. In fact, let me back it up a little bit. I forgot to mention that I'm the manager here at Samson Youth and Sport Development, and I manage 4,400 youth, under the age of 18 in Samson Cree Nation alone. So it is it's quite the task. And part of that task is, to develop programs where, that our youth can succeed in our cultural practices. And one of those programs, one of the successful programs that we have is the Community Freezer program. I'll give you a little bit of a rundown on how the program itself works. And as you've seen in the video, it really did start with a vision. I remember distinctively my grandfather, it wasn't not even that long before he passed away. He mentioned to the whole family, things are going to get really tough. And we didn't really know at the time what he was talking about, but I think I honestly believe he was referring to now, because you look at, times that we're living in, with COVID and, all these other unknowns that we're being faced with, I really believe he was talking about now. But anyways, he did mention that, that you do have to, continue on with what he taught me. Because it was my grandfather who taught me how to hunt, and he was my grandfather who taught me how to share with others, not just the skill set, but also how to share the meat with people. So every year from September to February, we usually run a program where we go hunting. I say we because I hunt with a group of hunters, and usually, like in years past, pre-COVID, we used to take a lot of different hunters. But ever since COVID took over, we've had to evolve the program a little bit, where we hunt in our cohorts, we hunt in our little groups of people that we know that are that are vaccinated, and most notably have been around people who aren't, affected by COVID. But as you can see in the picture, these are all pre-COVID, obviously. We've evolved this program into a youth program. I mentioned in the video too that, I'm glad that our youth are involved in this program, because this is really what we're doing this for, to pass on these traditions and to pass on this knowledge. So in the video you see it is fall time, and of course, and I was mentioning the program runs from September to February. So what we do in the program is we go hunting twice a month, or based on the need, of supply and demand. And what we do is we go hunting twice with a group of people, where we either go hunting for elk, moose, or deer. Those are the three common animals that we go after. And what we'll do is we'll harvest one, we'll bring it back to the community. If it's cold out there, we'll quarter it up and take the hide off right on the spot, because it's really hard to take the hide off when it freezes. But in some of these pictures here, like the one on the bottom left there, we brought some elk back from southern Alberta when we were invited to hunt on the Army base at Suffield. And it was an opportunity for us to actually show what we wanted to do. Is we wanted to bring a whole elk. So what we did is we killed the elk, put it in a truck whole. That way we can show, right from start to finish. We can show the youth how to take it apart, what part is used for what, and of course we don't have the knowledge on everything, on all the usage, because a lot of that comes from our elders, and I've yet to learn a lot of that knowledge as well. But still, what we know, we share with the kids that come into our facility. And it was really good, because it was an opportunity to be able to show the youth, but not just that, but to be able to dialogue with them, because these are our youth who are going to be taking over, the community in the future. But at the same time, they're the ones that, who knows, maybe they'll be taking over the community freezer program. You just never know. What I did when we were speaking with the youth while we were cutting them up, not only were we sharing laughs and, our knowledge, but it was an opportunity for me to ask the youth what they thought about a program like this. And most of them were, some of them, weren't really like into it, but the majority were. That's because, everybody in their community has a role, and some people are meant to be, to be warriors and hunters, whatever. And some people are meant to be others, like a chief or whatever. So this was an opportunity. It was really amazing to see these kids like cling on to something like this. And I started talking to them and asked them, I said, you know what? If we were to evolve this program, and step it up a little bit, and, start creating some policies where we're able to take you guys hunting, would you guys support this? Oh, and it was unanimous. A lot of the youth were like, I want to go. In fact, it was, just last week, I live in a local town close to Musquechees here called Panoka. And one of the Musquechees youth who used to really be a part of our programming here pre-COVID, I ran into him at the drugstore. I was just in and out, and all I heard was a little boy call my name. I said, Kacey, look, I was like, and then his name is Austin, and he's always in our facility. He's always wanting to be part of every program that we have here. He came up to me and he said, Kacey, I can't wait till we get back to, normal, so we can come back into the facility. And I said, what, Austin, me too. And the first thing he said, he goes, I want to go hunting when we get back. And you see that, a lot of the program itself is resonating in our youth. And that's really what we wanted to do, is to show the youth how to, be a part of something, that gives back to the community. Because, too often, we always hear take, especially in our community, but not too often do we give back. And it was, and just now, just listening to some of the lifted restrictions, it's pretty exciting, to, in hopes that, we can start getting back to programs and services like this, because we do have some plans to do some camps for the kids over the summer. And we're, it's pretty exciting to know that we can, begin the process of, pushing that forward, pushing our plans forward. But this community freezer program is really a community-based program. And I say that because this program, much like, other programs itself, always has had its shares of bumps and bruises. And I say that because when this program started, I really, because my dad has been in leadership, I've always thought, that's the avenue that we have to take. That's the avenue that we have to explore. And this is by any means not a knock on any of our leadership, both past and present, but it's more, see, when this program started, I approached our leaders and asked them to, if we can support this program. But, leaders have so much on their hands and so much, on their plate that they couldn't, support the program full out. So it was at a standstill for quite some time in the beginning. So what I did was I just went to the people. I started talking to grassroots people. I said, hey, you know what? This is what I do. This, I like to hunt, and it's my place where I find my peace and my stress relief. And I started talking to people, and then they started catching on. They started catching on to it, and I said, you know what? Would you guys support this program? And this is just to our general grassroots people, and just by word of mouth, because it was really a grassroots start. And a lot of them said, you know what, that's an awesome program. That's an awesome idea. You should just keep pushing forward. We'll support you. We'll support you. And sure enough, this program has a lot of community support because it really is community driven. It's a program for the people, by the people. And, and that's why, we wanted to grow this program into, something more. And it was actually kind of just recently, in 2019, Dr. Brenda Parley from the U of A and Robbie Potts had reached out to me on, a possible collaboration with the Community Freezer Program and their research on chronic waste disease. And I thought at the time, that would be really good. I thought, because I didn't really know too much about chronic waste disease, but now you see the collaboration, and you see the the partnership, bigger now than it was in 2019 because of COVID. And a lot of things, health is on the mindset of a lot of people, and not just health of the individuals, but health of your animals. So there was a lot of questions. I remember when COVID first happened, I was invited to a community meeting. Our chief invited us together to come together and come up with some ideas on how, what do we do about COVID? And it was just an initial meeting. But and one of the ideas that was brought forward was by the elders was for our hunters in our community to go out and hunt for the people. And but with that, there was a question about the health of the animals, because not a lot of people know about chronic waste disease. And like myself, I've been hunting for many years, and not even I knew much about it. I've heard about it, but I didn't know anything, about how to look for it in animals, and what it does, where it came from, But it was this is a really good opportunity and a good collaboration to have this this partnership with the U of A, because any program, it doesn't survive without many, because I always believe, when I do work on my programming, I always believe that many hands make for light work. And it's really important to partner with those who have the like mind, right, and who have a shared vision, so they can help make your job a lot easier. And with that, I'm really glad that I'm very thankful actually that we've evolved the program into what it is now. And with the possible restrictions being lifted for the summer and for the summer camps, it's an opportunity for us to plan and prep for what we have planned moving forward. And in the fall, I'm hoping, that, with the restrictions, if they stay, that we can take some youth out and actually physically take them hunting with us, so they can actually see the kill and the protocol that takes place. because there's some protocol, and I want to talk a little bit about that before I move on here. When we go hunting, it's not what I've learned throughout the years, that hunting is, beyond just a physical, a physical doing. I've learned, and that, throughout the years, that hunting is very spiritual. And I say that because, before we go hunting, we're always making sure that we pray and we ask the Creator, using tobacco and smudge, to, not just look. We never pray for us to get an animal, but we pray for safety, because who knows what can happen out there. And we just pray, that, things work out. And usually when we do that, and I say this humbly, that the program itself it's got a pretty good success rate when we go hunting. Like, we're about like 95% successful when we're out there. And it's almost a given that we're going to get something. That's because we follow the prayer, and that's how, that's the example of how I see this as a spiritual aspect, as not so much a physical. Also, with that spiritual aspect, I just mentioned that we are 95% successful, but there was a time when we fell into I would say, a hunting slump. Where we didn't get animals for quite some time. And the guys that I go hunting with, we were getting frustrated. It was a really frustrating time. And I share the story because I know it's meant to be shared. I remember we went hunting this one time. We shot a moose, and we forgot to provide the tobacco after the kill. Just for for the sake of it, not just being cold out, but for excitement too. And we just forgot to pray and ask and thank the animal for, giving his life to us, and, for the purpose of the community freezer. But with that, what had happened was, without offering the proper protocol, the next time we went hunting, we weren't successful. And then the next time we went hunting, we weren't successful again. And then the third time, and the fourth time, and then on the fifth time, I said, something's not right, guys. And they knew it too, the guys in my group. And I said, I just stopped the truck and I said, hey, look, let's just pray. I know why this is happening. And it's because we didn't offer protocol. We weren't in sync with what, with natural law. So we stopped and we began to just pray. Like, we didn't have any smudge out there. Like, we just have tobacco, but we just all began to pray, just in our own ways and in our own silence. And then, I kid you not, like, right after that prayer, like not even minutes, there was 2 moose just standing there, and we managed to take them both. And you always know when you're supposed to take animals, because it's not, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's easier than other times. Like, things just work out. Like, when you're taking the animal apart, things just work. And it's, it just seems to, you just seem to get that extra energy when you're hauling out an animal, because they could be like 800, 900 pounds, and it gets, it's physically demanding, especially if you get them really far. But I say that because there's times when, another spiritual lesson that I've learned, there's times when I've taken an animal that I probably shouldn't have, because what will happen is, you'll start to notice that things will start to happen to you. Like maybe your brakes will go. Like, that's what happened to me when we were out there. Or you get a flat tire, or, things start happening to your vehicle. And, there's it's really interesting how it works, but you have to kind of experience it to really understand what's taking place. And there's times when you're supposed to harvest an animal, because spiritually we believe that animals give themselves to you. And when there's an animal just standing there and just, that won't do nothing, then, and you get it, it's you just know that you're supposed to get it. And I'll share a recent story before I move on here. Just this past winter, I shot a moose that was like I think we ranged it at like 341 yards. I shot it, and it was like, for me, that range, it's a pretty lucky shot. I don't usually take them that far, but we couldn't get any closer. And about a month later, I saw a moose, and just so happened that I was in the same spot, and there was a moose in the exact same spot as that moose that we shot a month before. And same conditions, winter, no wind, nothing, same distance, measured it out, and I didn't get it. And it was, I thought, okay, and I shot once, twice, maybe 3 times, and I figured, you know what, maybe, I said, you know what, guys, maybe we weren't supposed to get it. And it's, these are spiritual lessons, and these are the examples that I've found over the years that have taught me, and what I want to close in is that I believe, that the land has taught me a lot. The land is such a great teacher. Everything and the animals itself, nature itself, it's such a great teacher. And it's it's so humbling just to learn. And I'm always eager to learn, new things every time we're out there, because sometimes, like I learn new protocols. Like I go hunting with different people, and some people do different prayers, and it's interesting, and I'm all for it. Yeah, I just said, hey, wow, that's awesome. You guys do that, that's awesome. As long as we're all in sync with the creator, with Mother Nature, and it's fine by me. But with that, I would like to just pass it over to both Robbie and Hannah, who we work together. And I'm very thankful, as I mentioned earlier, for this partnership and this collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kacey. Did you want to share your video?
Yeah, sure. Actually, this was, I just mentioned this was the moose that I shot 341 yards, but I wanted to make a quick little, because it was kind of the thing on TikTok for the kids, and I wanted to do this for our youth, to make a quick little time-lapse video of how to take apart a nose and how to take out a tongue. So, I know it could be graphic, but at the same time, this is part of who we are. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kacey. I think maybe, Robbie, I might just get you to introduce yourself quickly, and then I'll introduce myself, and then we can jump into the rest of the slides.
Yep. Okay, Robbie Potts, introduce myself before. I started working with CWD April, May 2019. Again, before that, I had an idea what it was, but I had no idea how prevalent it was actually in our environment here in Alberta. And not only that, I didn't realize how devastating it is on the not only the deer population, but the health of even just the plants and stuff, because where the deer actually forage and eat and sleep and stuff, if they're infected with that chronic wasting disease, it stays in that exact spot. It doesn't leave, it doesn't wash away. So, but other than that, before we get into the biological side of it, I guess, of the chronic wasting disease, I'd like to kind of elaborate on our relationship with the animal. Like Kacey obviously mentioned a lot of it, that us as community hunters, we don't view hunting and harvesting as a God-given right. We view it as a blessing. Like everything we get it's a blessing for us, and we're grateful for it every time we have it. So with that said, with the animal that we do harvest and kill, that our whole mindset going into it is that this animal does not go to waste, right? That the meat will nourish either ourselves or whoever we're sharing the meat with. So whatever part of that animal, we try our best to use as much of it as we can, because as Kacey said, there's I guess you can say that terminology we always use as Cree people is that, like, kind of like what goes around comes around. It'll there's always consequences for breaking our natural laws, right? So so yeah, with that said, working with CWD here, we started with working with the Treaty 6 chiefs at that time. In other words, just kind of asking them what that this CWD really was becoming a threat to our livelihoods, and that it could seriously devastate traditional diet, that we do rely heavily on the ungulate populations for our meat. Like we don't, we know 100% that that meat's way healthier than the one at the store. You know, there's no doubt that, you know, that moose will nourish us a lot better than the cow, right? And that it'll, and not only that, it later on down the road, we don't see any after effects, right? So, yeah, this project began as a pilot in Muscatine. So we started with, first place we collaborated with Kacey's community freezer, because we knew he did a lot of hunting, and that there was the idea of, you know, chronic wasting disease and going into the people's people eating infected meat, right? Is obviously was the concern. So it was, so we started with Kacey, and it was I think the first issue we had was obviously testing. Like how do we know how to test for this? And so we figured out that the only place you can do it is through the brain, and that through the brainstem and through the glands that are behind the jaw. So that's pretty much the only place they can detect for it as of right now. So what we found was with that was, I think you could probably get to the next slide there, Hannah. So yeah, this is probably what we wanted to say what it is. It's 100% fatal for the deer, moose, elk, and caribou. And it's very slow. It it takes years for the actual symptoms to actually show. So in between then, you could have a perfectly normal looking fat deer, and it could be infected because you can't tell because of I guess the fatal stages kind of comes quick at the end. So yeah, like I said, it gets spreads through shedding into the environment, through dropping saliva, other bodily fluids, and especially mating season. That's probably one time when it gets spread quite a bit. So again, like they recommend that we do not consume it because yeah, we just don't know the long-term effects of it. And with that said, apparently thousands of people eat it every year unknowingly. So yeah, it's obviously a concern for the community, especially since the community does eat a lot of wild meat. Like it's not like we've given up that traditional diet. There's a lot of people that still rely heavily on it, especially for ceremony. So the problem with the testing we found was that it can take a long time. It's not something that they can just do overnight based on capacity and all that. So when it comes to ceremony, like how can we solve that? Because sometimes we need that meat like in a few days. Like the ceremony's not, you know, it's not like we planned it months ahead of time. Sometimes we really need it then and then. And what happens then when we don't have time to wait for, you know, the testing to come back, right? So other than that, with the locale, with how far it's spread, you can see on the map there with the watersheds that it's actually coming out of. So you have the Old Man in the Bow River there watershed, and then up in the north there you have the Battle River watershed. You can see how it's coming in through there from Saskatchewan. So as you can see towards our WMU there at 240, I can't remember which.
226.
Yeah, 226. There's actually there's new cases there now. Wow. But yeah, we're kind of at the edge of that, like cut in half of that WMU Muscatine. So we actually do have positive cases in our watershed. So that's obviously quite concerning. So yeah, I thought maybe I'll give Hannah some time here to talk a bit.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, and just for reference, I've edited this map a little bit. So the yellow dot there is approximately where Musqueam is. And then the red dot is Edmonton, and the sort of teal dot is Calgary. So yeah, this map was from the final results of the Government of Alberta's 2020 surveillance season. And these orange areas here are the mandatory head submission zones, which they changed last year. It used to be sort of this whole area, but now they've made it the sort of the easternmost border near Saskatchewan, and then the ring around where it's spreading. So the total new CWD cases from this testing season, there were 927 cases. So that's what all those stars represent. And they find it's mostly male mule deer, but it can affect like deer, moose, and elk. There were no positive tests in moose this year, which is good. And they also stated that there was no spread northward this year, but there was noted spread into the southern foothills area, which is concerning the closer it gets to the mountains and to the BC border. So I think next, I'm just going to talk a little bit about community-based research, community-based monitoring. First, maybe I'll introduce myself. My name is Hannah Cunningham. I'm a graduate student at the University of Alberta. I'm coming from the perspective of a settler person living in so-called Edmonton or Muskogee-Waskagan. And yeah, I've been working on this project with Kacey and Robbie since 2019. Time flies, it's crazy. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about what is community-based monitoring of wildlife disease, because that's sort of how this project started after we sort of made these connections with each other, my supervisor, myself, Robbie, and Kacey, and started talking about this problem of chronic wasting disease and some of the barriers to access testing services for Indigenous hunters. So yeah, as I'm sure you can all understand, wildlife disease is a very complicated issue that's part of a big complex system. It's impacted not only by the health of the environment and the health of the animals, but also the environmental management that we do and the actions of people. And it impacts other issues like food security. So conventional wildlife management that we sort of see in governments now, it is moving more towards a interdisciplinary and more of a big picture approach, but it continues to be pretty heavily rooted in Western science and sort of colonial systems of government and management. So community-based monitoring is really sort of recognizing that the involvement of community members as research partners at all stages of the project allow for community-specific concerns to be addressed, sort of like Kacey was talking about, starting with the people instead of going from a top-down approach. And this can help sort of be an act of sovereignty over people's local lands and resources. And it can also provide opportunities for the co-production of knowledge between different groups involved and be mutually beneficial for the community and for research institutions. And there's a growing number of Indigenous communities that are engaged in community-based monitoring of different natural resources as opportunities to sort of address these inequities in the production of knowledge and how different knowledge systems are treated around natural resources. So community-based research, obviously you tailor it to the community with which you're working. But the way that we've sort of approached this with this project is community involvement through all stages of the project. So it's important to make sure that even from project development to all the way at the end, when you're sort of sharing your findings and your knowledge, that everybody's involved the whole way. And especially when coming up with, sort of your research questions, your research goals, it's important for everyone to be involved in that from the beginning. It's also important for it to be community-led. So through the hiring and training of community members to, take over and take ownership of the project, and collaboration with existing organizations within the community. So organizations like the Community Freezer Program. So this sort of project is sort of one that, yes, maybe it started with the university, but really seeing it as a project that you know, a community like Samson Cree Nation really owns and takes ownership of and is leading. And it's important that the project outcomes are beneficial for the community and that community members are compensated appropriately for their time and knowledge. So I made a little flow chart of what sort of our process looked like. So Robbie had talked about how back in 2019, when we first started this project, it really started because of concerns about chronic wasting disease brought up by leadership, and there was meetings that took place between the university and leadership at the higher sort of like Treaty 6 leadership level, as well as leadership and community members in Samson Cree Nation and in Masquatchis. And then there was sort of a phase where we were, you know, talking about the project, talking about what it might look like, and sort of building those relationships between, you know, myself and my supervisor and the team at the University of Alberta and Samson Cree Nation. And then as we've progressed and sort of built this project and worked our way through sort of this pilot program of community-based monitoring, it's a dynamic, you know, way of developing a project. So you're always wanting that feedback between, you know, community and the research team. So we have our several community-based monitoring activities that were developed by sort of the research team and done in participation with hunters and land users from Samson Cree Nation, and then also flowing that through existing community capacity. So, you know, having workshops and stuff with Kacey and the Community Freezer program, and working together and always giving feedback and seeing, okay, what's working, what do people want, how do we want to change this?
Want me to do this one, Hannah?
Sure.
Masquatchis, Alberta. So just kind of give you a little background of the area. So there's actually 4 bands here. Louis Bull, Ermiskin, Montana, and Samson. So they all kind of border each other. So it's kind of a big area. I don't know exactly how many square miles it is, but other than that, there's a lot of farmland here. If you actually go on Google Maps and go to Masquatchis, you can actually see a lot of the farming that goes on here, and a lot of it is commercial farmings from non-Indigenous farmers that are off the reserve that just basically come here and farm. And we have some natural areas here. That's kind of there's a few natural areas towards the river, but primarily the vegetation you see here is not a whole lot of spruce, but a lot of willow, a lot of poplar trees. So yeah, but that farmland, it really does provide a suitable habitat for the deer, and that you know, there's actually a lot of food for them that come out here. So there is quite a big, from what I gather, it's primarily a whitetail deer population here. So not only that, there's also deer, moose, waterfowl. So there's a lot of things that and small game that we hunt here in the community. Like we don't, and there's also the off reserve too that people do hunt. People do travel great distances to go hunt, because there's obviously, if everybody hunts on the reserve, there's not going to be enough animals for us to hunt, unless you're hunting waterfowl. But yeah, it's actually a really nice area. It's very beautiful. There's you can see that there is other than farmland, there is a lot of lush green wilderness here that we do cherish, you know. With that said, yeah, it's primarily whitetail, like what Hannah said. The mule deer here in Alberta, when you go out to the east, it's the whitetail. So eastern United States, eastern Canada, it's actually the whitetail populations that are being affected out that way. As for us, it's primarily the mule population. But yeah, I guess that's probably a tough part, I'd say, with the data here, is that it's tough to, I think, safe to say, with even Kacey would agree on this, that it's not very common. You can get a mule deer in a middle of Samson. Like there's a lot of whitetail that you see roaming here, and just like moose and stuff. I guess a mule is kind of kind of an odd thing unless you go off reserve. So it was kind of weird because I used to hear that it was the other way around before. There was nothing but mule deer here in the past, and it's kind of a flip side now. So yeah, so I guess this issue of getting the test results in and stuff was that's the main problem with the hunting, like I was explained before, the spiritual side of it. Like, it's to get a hunter to not only give up his animal, but even to ask him for the brain, because even to get the brain tested, there's they have a use for it. There's actually a very big use for the brain when it comes to working with tan hide, right? So you can't easily just go, grip a brain from a hunter and say that we need it for testing, right? And not only that, but obviously the fear of having that animal being positive, right? And then having that hunter waste that meat, right? To have to throw it out, like we're going against our teachings doing that, right? So, but aside from the traditional aspects of it, it was the testing of it. It's just the timeline of it, and just had the resources they were just really not in favor of the Indigenous hunters. And that is not only that, there's no tag system, right? And that I think just the fact that just the idea that there's no tag system for Indigenous hunters, I felt that the province just didn't really find it important that we Indigenous hunters, that we do really need to have we do really need to have these resources in place, just due to the fact of how frequently we hunt. That we do hunt out of season too, right? Because we don't have most non-Indigenous hunters mainly have their seasons in the fall, whereas us, we don't have a limit to our season other than the fawning season. So yeah, also there's access to land for Indigenous hunters is complicated too, because there's this jurisdiction problem between federal and provincial, right? Like we do have rights to hunt in federal land, but then there's the province that'll come and say that we don't have a right to hunt on provincial land, which is kind of an issue for hunters in terms of getting confused of where to hunt, finding our legality, and even just the paranoia of us going out and wondering if we're going to get detained from Fish and Wildlife, right, for doing our duty. So obviously the privatization of land, right, and the wildlife CWD obviously reduces the area of it where they want to hunt, because now we look at the map and I'm sure a lot of these hunters strategically hunt where they go, and what are they going to do when they know that there's CWD in that area? They scare them off from that area. Now where we got left to go? We see the federal land shrinking going towards the province. So yeah, like I said, the inaccessibility of drop-off locations for those samples, right? I don't even think some of them are open all year round. Like how can we make it easier for the hunter? So that's kind of where we stepped in and kind of used we kind of piggybacked off of Kacey's monitoring freezer program, and that kind of used it as a drop-off point. If any hunters wanted to come leave their heads there, that they were more than welcome to use it as a drop-off point. And then me or Kacey would make the trip up to Edmonton and drop off the head at the lab. So, but other than that, so far there hasn't been any positive cases from the reserve. So that's a positive. That's good news. But with that said, I still think we need more testing to be done in that there needs to be more there needs to be more involvement in terms of the hunters getting their head in. But like I said, we don't only have the policy barriers, but we also have the traditional barriers, and in that we just can't simply ask the hunter to give up their animal because it was given to them, right? They look at it as a sacred animal. So it's not something that they can easily just throw in a dumpster because of it having a disease, right? So I think having a better testing system is something that we're hopeful for in the future, and that there's not so that there's a better way that we can find it. So yeah, I think you can get to the next slide, Johanna. I'll hand this on over to you.
Awesome, perfect. Yeah, thanks, Robbie. So sort of based off some of those issues of accessibility, we've built sort of I guess this pilot project was sort of us figuring out how to do community-based monitoring of chronic wasting disease. I know I only have about 9 minutes left, so I'll quickly go through some of the different areas that we've focused on. So kind of like I said earlier, before we even started, working with people on this project, first, it was all about determining need and making sure that we consult with local leadership and community organizations when planning the project to make sure that that the project was developed to address the concerns of everybody. And then it was also important to spend time developing this shared understanding and respectful relationships with each other. As someone coming from, like a white researcher coming from the city, making sure that there was that understanding of treaty rights and hunting rights, and really just as a researcher and as someone participating on a group project like this, just recognizing your positionality and where you're coming from and your experiences and what you're bringing to the project, and yeah, understanding the big picture, sort of like Robbie was talking about the different levels of risk perception around chronic wasting disease. So I think you can sort of see how across Alberta, depending where you're coming from, people are going to have different concerns around this disease. Someone who's hunting recreationally might have a different risk perception than someone who's hunting to feed their family or to feed their community. Learning from elders and oral histories is also important in the development of this project, and sort of, making sure that we're situating it in a good way in Maskwacis with Samson Cree Nation. And like I've said before, recognizing its existing capacity. So the Samson Community Freezer Program has been a huge part of this project since the beginning. And it wouldn't be what it is today without Kacey and his hunters and Robbie. So yeah, this was a magazine feature from the Indigenous Sport Council Alberta magazine, I think, of Kacey and Chris. So yeah, just wanted to feature that. And then also focusing on, education and co-learning together. So some of the different things that we've done as deliverables, I guess you could call them, is increasing availability of chronic wasting disease information for community members. So we've done this through hosting some workshops pre-COVID where people could come together and talk about hunting and chronic wasting disease, and Kacey would lead demonstrations on how to properly prepare a sample to be tested, and also focusing on community voices in the educational and management materials that we've made. This includes a video. I don't think we'll have time to show it today, but I can include a link in the chat. A video featuring both community members from Samson Cree Nation, and then also some of our friends in Treaty 8 First Nations as well. And then working to increase communication between Samson Cree Nation and the existing government-led monitoring program. Even just starting, talking about some of those cultural knowledge gaps, that, talking about other maybe potential ways that we could, allow people to save the brain, or ways that we could provide a smaller sample so that it's not sending in the whole head that hunters aren't going to be able to get back. So just starting those conversations and creating a little bit more dialogue through our relationship with the staff at the lab. And then in working with hunters, we made a manual sort of all about chronic wasting disease in the Treaty 6 Central Alberta context. And then also a shorter version that's supposed to be kind of like a pocket brochure that is a little more portable for taking hunting. And then we also have been, we have a survey that we've developed that we've done with hunters that to sort of start tracking some of the perceptions of wildlife health and, you know, some questions about what people have observed about wildlife health in general and some specific questions about chronic wasting disease. And the idea is that this could continue over time and then sort of creates a data set that people in the community could look back at and, you know, look and see when some observations started to change and stuff like that. Yeah, like I said, we made a video that I will leave a link to, and we hosted a couple workshops. And yeah, like Robbie said, facilitating sample submissions was a pretty big chunk of the program, and just making sure that we were helping, using some of the university's capacity to help get samples in and tested. And we've also made some connections with other researchers so that people from the community can ask questions, people can learn from each other. So yeah, lots of relationship building and just helping to get things tested where we can. And this is the video. I'll provide a link to it in the chat. Yeah, and going forward, the project has received a bit more money through a grant partnership through the University of Alberta and the University of Lethbridge and Alberta Environment and Parks to continue some work and sort of broaden our goals to some of the stuff that Kacey had talked about, including more youth involvement, hopefully more workshops, supporting the community freezer program more, creating more videos, stuff like that. So yeah, and then maybe I'll turn it over to Robbie or Kacey, and we can do any final thoughts. I know we only have a couple minutes left.
Yeah. Maybe I'll share this with Kacey to close it. So yeah, just concerns about wildlife health on a global scale, food security and sovereignty, because yeah, it's point to a growing need for community engagement and the monitoring for wildlife for these kind of diseases, especially when there are few opportunities for communities to actually get engaged in the monitoring of it. So the goal of this is just to provide the support for the community program. So not only the CWD education, but for hunting and well-being as well, and that the community, you know, looks as hunting as more important than going to the meat market, right? So yeah, so just some closing thoughts. So
And also too, like, thank you, Hannah and Robbie, for your segment of the presentation. But you also see the importance of paralleling, you know, and collaborating with these two programs. And, you know, you can see, especially right now with health being a major issue, it's important to, you know, we get a grip and we get an understanding of what chronic wasting disease is doing to our animals. Therefore, we have an understanding of where we can be, where we can and can't go. And, you know, we have a system in place where we could, you know, at least get the heads tested and we'll know, you know, if an animal has CWD or not. Thank you very much.
hi.
Well, thank you so much for that presentation. It was funny. I'm like watching you. I'm like, this is like the best webinar ever. I'm so happy I'm here to watch it. Oh, wait, I'm hosting it. Ha! I got lost. You seduced me by this information because it was so important, so timely. We can't stress enough how timely this information is. And to your note, Kacey, that your grandfather saw this, coming. I'm sure many elders have, and it'd be interesting, you know, in fact, hey, we actually have a grandmother circle next week talking about this actual thing. So that's happening next week. So this was the perfect opener to June. We appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your information. We will have this video. So this is recorded, so it will be on the ARPA, so arpaonline.ca, the Walking with Indigenous Community section. We have an Indigenous Oral Knowledge Hub. So this recording will be on that. So Hannah, we could also share your video on that Knowledge Hub too as a resource. And you could also find the access to the free e-module there as well as all part of that resources, because we want to share it out and get the word out. And so however your team wants to do that at ARPA will also definitely help you. So thank you. That was amazing. It's I think one of my favorite webinars, I would say, of 2021, and I wouldn't lie. So I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you again for the prayer, Kacey. Thank you for all those who are here now with us, taking part in this live, and to all those who will watch this later. Please share it out to your community members, to other communities, because this is a resource and a message that we want to share out into the community, into the province, but also across the nation. So thanks again, everyone. I appreciate that, and we are done.